As always, it would probably be best if I had written some sort of script for this or not. But, well, I prefer just to, you know, yeah, that's why people write scripts. They don't just like space out and like, oh, how should I word this? And I'm like, I have no fucking clue. But, and I was taking a shower and I was thinking, you know, this could be a version of the trolley problem. We'll just call it Hitler in a wheelchair. This is a propaganda picture. It was a German propaganda. It shows Adolf Hitler in medieval armor. It was called The Standard Bearer. Was painted by the artist Hubert Ladenzinger. I don't know how to pronounce that, even though I actually am trying to learn how to speak German, but that just mainly just completely different reasons. I want to learn German, Japanese, French, and Hebrew in that order. What can I say? I like metal bands like Rammstein, which universally I think would all want to kick the ass of Hitler if they ever had the chance. But this was displayed in the Great German Art Exhibition in Munich, how do I pronounce that, in 1937. So this was actual painting, portrait. And I'm not going to get into a thing about like modern day and propaganda. Heck, I think the movie The Network does a good example talking about how incredible just television was in the 1970s at being able to influence people. That's not why we're here. And again, it'd be a good idea if I'd wrote some sort of script or something. But I thought Hitler would be good for this question, this trolley problem thing. Simply put, no, that does bring up another idea for a trolley problem, but so I'll say that other thing first. But main thing, I thought Hitler would be a good example just because I'm pretty sure 99% of the human race hates Hitler and considers him an example of, well, a very bad person. Basically, an example of evil. That basically, if you had to pick a person that you feel that everybody knows about, that you feel deserves to go to hell, you'd pick Hitler. Obviously, there are some people that don't dislike Hitler. That's, again, we're going by statistics here. I could literally say any statistic in the world, and there's always going to be some exception to the rule, no matter what it is. That being said, I would say the vast majority of people, and again, I don't know if it's actually 99%, I would think it's actually slightly more, like there's a decimal there. But I would feel the majority of people that know about Hitler would think that Hitler was a bad person and would dislike Hitler, and if given the chance, would punch Hitler in the face. Provided, Hitler wouldn't be able to shoot you afterward. Just saying, if he was like, if it was 1940s Germany, you probably wouldn't be able to do that just because, well, I don't think you'd even get close enough to have the chance. But, though that does make me think of a trolley problem. Like, what if, the original trolley problem is, yeah, the train going toward 5 people, but you can divert it toward 1 person? What if the train's going toward Hitler? Now, what if the trying to think of a way to word this, but this wasn't where I was going originally with this. But I'm sure there's some way to use Hitler in the trolley problem. But I was thinking more so along the lines of this. I'm someone who advocates that torture as well as hell are unjustified. That it would be wrong for anybody to be tortured in hell. That being said, I would think one person everyone can universally dislike, myself including, would be Hitler. And we're already at 4.5 minutes because I take forever to say anything, because this is why you should write a script. The main point is this. Let's say you, whoever you are listening to this, you go to heaven. And no matter what you could ever do or say in heaven, you will stay in heaven. Basically, there's nothing you can do to be kicked out of heaven. Now let's say you and only you are given access to the room where Hitler is. That he's not in heaven, but he's Hitler is basically put in a room next to a giant pit of fire. You know, a quote unquote hell. And heck, you could also have different options where it could be a room of fire and brimstone, or it could, like, basically he's in like a something that looks like a hospital bedroom, and for the most part is unharmed and has what he needs to feel comfortable to be separated from everybody else in reality. Only you know that he's here, and only you have access to this. Should you enter the room, Hitler is bound to a wheelchair. The question is this: Hitler is next to the giant pit of fire. Do you push Hitler into the pit of fire for him to burn? Also, does it change the question at all if Hitler is technically immortal in this situation, so he's not allowed into heaven, but he's stuck in this little room by himself in isolation. And he can see into a place that's just a giant pit of fire like you'd expect in the most basic depictions of hell. You are able to go in and just physically you just push him into the pit of fire. And there's nothing he can do to stop you or to hurt you. And there's nobody that would know about this, so it's not like anybody would be judging you regardless of any decision you made. You can also choose to just ignore him. You could just leave him to his isolation alone. He's not going to be burning in hell, but he's not going to be in heaven either. All you're doing is just deciding not to physically push him in yourself, and just to leave him in the room next to the hell in the sort of purgatory. Or if you were to and let's say if you push him into the fire, he burns that fire for 24 hours, and then he regenerates and goes back into the room, fully healed. But with, the memory of all the time in hell, of being burned. Do you then return every single day to push him into the fire every single day, over and over and over? What would be your feelings on the matter? What if instead of pushing the wheelchair, you could just push a button, and it just sort of tilted his room into it? Which one he would need to be tied into a wheelchair. The whole point of the wheelchair thing is the idea that he wouldn't be able to fight back or hurt you, and the idea that not like anybody in heaven would be judging you regardless of what you choose. But let's say the button, like you can push a button and it basically bounds him to a wheelchair, but you still have to physically go in there and push him into the fire. Let's say it's also you're pushing him into a hallway that has, like, there's a small hallway next to his room imagine like a room that's missing one wall, and the wall leads into a hallway with 4 other rooms. There's no door, there's nothing stopping him from walking in there on his own, but of course he's not going to do that. Let's say one is just fire, another would be like the movie Hellraiser or some shit. Next one is like Freddy Krueger, and the 4th one has Jason Voorhees or something. Or like there's a 5th room and it's the thing that, Frieza goes in where he's hung up being sung to by, fairies and drummermen and stuff. Main thing is this: you could just, that he's there, you ignore him and just leave him there to rot. Or you could even go there and just talk to him if you chose to. You could also, at any point, push that button, he's bound to the wheelchair, and you can just leave him bound to the wheelchair. Let's take away that bit of freedom, but you're not physically torturing him. Or you could push him in any of the rooms. And of course, you can always substitute Hitler for anyone else you feel, whether it's someone that's personally slighted you in real life, or heck, other people in the Nazi Party stuff like Joseph Mengele, or I think it's Amon Gepth, if I remember his name right, the guy from Schindler's List, in charge of that one camp. Or you could pick many people throughout history. Heck, some people would probably say choose Mao or Saddam Hussein. Just whoever you yourself would determine. Heck, some people would say pick Jeffrey Dahmer or Charles Manson. Basically, whoever you would consider the definition of what you consider evil, somebody that would deserve hell. But regardless of which room you push him into, within 24 hours, he would be healed, regenerated, fully healthy, and back in his room completely safe. And again, the doors to those other places are still open, but he, nothing's forcing him to go into those rooms except you. If you do nothing, he just stays in his room in isolation all alone with nothing bad. You can also just stop by and just talk to him. You could also push him into any of those things. But you have to, if you wanted to do that, you'd basically have to do it every single day. Heck, I imagine some people would answer that they would push him into a couple rooms, then just sort of forget about him for a while, and then maybe 1,000 years later, do it again. The question is this, would you, I don't know, be interested enough to actually show up every day to go do that? I don't know if you'd put any sort of effort, like you had to walk a mile to get there or something, but at that point, I don't know. But the main point is this. Heck, you can have a wheelchair, a trolley problem, basically. There's a trolley, and it's going toward one person, one random person who has never done anything wrong. On the other track, there's Hitler and 500 other people. Do you divert the track? Actually, this one, let's just take the other person out of the equation. Let's say there's a train and there's 2 tracks. It's initially set up to go down a track with 0 people on it, meaning if you do nothing, nobody gets hit by a train. That's it. Or you divert the train, and the train will hit Hitler and 500 other people. Do you pull that lever? Basically, if you had to go back in time, you could kill Hitler. Aside from the whole timeline stuff and the fact that you could probably create someone worse than Hitler and all that stuff, and also a lot of things have changed in history over time. I'm just saying, if in order to do it, you had to kill a bunch of innocent people, that you wouldn't be able to justify that. But that's another question entirely. The main question about the Hitler and the wheelchair question is this. If you're in heaven and nobody knows what you're doing, and nothing you do could ever receive you any sort of punishment or have you kicked out of heaven anyway, you have total carte blanche and complete authority. Heck, we could use stuff like the Stanford experiment and the Milgram experiment, where the Milgram experiment talks about a person simply obeying authority, which kind of is a way of trying to explain why people would actually follow Hitler in the first place. And then you have the Stanford experiment, which kind of talks about the sort of dormant aggressive nature in humans, as well as the fact that sometimes humans will become violent, not just from positions of authority, but from the environments they're in. The idea of each one is the Milgram experiment was the idea that if you simply had a guy, that if you had, it was like 60s or 70s, the idea is if you just had random American citizens, would you be able to convince them to commit murder, albeit indirectly, if an authority figure told them to? And it was a surprising high number of people that would actually, do what they were told. And then, of course, the Stanford experiment is like the idea that if people are put into a position like, prison guards or something, that they're likely to abuse that power and they're likely to be more violent. So the idea is if you're in a situation where both the authority as well as what you've been taught your whole life and as well as what you know about this person, as well as just your position and just the environment you're in, how things, I don't know. So like I said, this is why people write scripts, because I keep getting off topic. The idea is like people in the past, different environments would cause different behaviors. And in many situations, those behaviors were survival instincts. And they're things that, a lot of things that we consider immoral now weren't even thought about in the past. I mean, you take the major thing about slavery is that Slavery was a horrible thing. It always has been. But the fact that so many societies have allowed it is disgusting. That being said, there were so many societies that even when they had issues with slavery, they didn't care about slavery. They just didn't want to be slaves themselves. I mean, you see that time and time again in civilizations from thousands of years ago. And it's just, you'd think if there was a code of law or code of like morality, that would be one of the first things that would be outlawed. That you can't do that. But I mean, heck, we don't have it. Like I'm a Christian, I believe in God, and yet you have the Ten Commandments, and I mean, not only do you not have a commandment against slavery, but you have a commandment saying not to covet your neighbor's slave. So it's like, obviously there's concerns there. It's like, but then again, the society in the past would have been terrible. No modern medicine, no air conditioning, no anime. Again, this is why you have scripts. I can't stay focused on anything. But the main point is I'm trying to say is this. I'm somebody who advocates that, torture and hell itself is wrong. And I feel movies like Hellraiser and video games like Demonophobia are good, basically fictional case studies in which nobody actually gets hurt. It's just a drawing that sort of just allows you to sort of put the idea out there to explore thought without hurting anybody as a statement of, okay, these people say hell is justifiable. Well, here's a rendition of what that would be like. It's like the idea that if things were rendered the way it was expected in, say, Dante's Inferno, that book from 500-600 years ago. I mean, imagine if you're in heaven, you could actually see all of that happening. Would you be okay with it? As far as I'm concerned at that point, if people are really, one, the fact that a lot of people would be getting sentenced to hell in those situations for arbitrary things. Like, oh, you ate bacon. Oh, you like the wrong person. Oh, you had the wrong opinion. Oh, you believed the wrong thing. It just seems overly cruel. But at that point, if instead of arguing just random person going to hell for an arbitrary reason, what if we're arguing somebody that 99% of humanity would agree that is a bad person that would deserve hell? The main thing is this. If you were the person who had to physically push Hitler into the hellfire, and he only stayed there for 24 hours, and in order for him to be in hell, you literally had to go in and push Hitler into the fire day after day after day for all eternity. Granted, it only takes 5 minutes out of your day, but still, if you had to do that, would you? Would you even bother? Would you actually talk to him? Which of those doors would you push him? What other fate would you possibly wish on him? If you had to go physically there and take 5 minutes, or even, let's say if you had required to walk a couple miles back and forth in a special hallway only you could go to, would you spend a couple hours out of every day for the rest of eternity to keep pushing Hitler into the fire? Then there's another question. If you had the option to simply pull a lever that permanently killed Hitler and put him out of existence to where he didn't exist at all anymore, so he'll never go into hell or suffer again, but he won't exist anymore either. Because at that point, it's like, again, I'm kind of the opinion that if somebody's a really bad person, then they just shouldn't exist. What's the point of keeping someone around just to, torture them? I mean, heck, anytime medieval or feudal age, or even a few hundred years ago, usually they did public executions, not mainly as an idea to punish the person, but as a way of scaring everyone else. It was just used for fear and control. And I understand a degree of punishment is required for justice, but at the same time, one, if you're the one who has to actually do it, would you? And even then, after a while, would you eventually, if you had that lever that was always there, that allowed you to just flip that lever and he was basically dead? He basically didn't exist anymore and his spirit was out of existence. Also, would it change if you knew the lever could be flipped up at any time, but only by you? So that at some point in the future, if you decide, oh, you know what, maybe he does deserve me, and you just flip the switch back up, and you've just resurrected him to be put back to suffering. Like I said, I advocate that things like hell or people being controlling on others or overly, like, I don't know, sadistic or cruel, that it's wrong. And certainly I wouldn't blame certain people, especially if, heck, if you were one of the people from like the, Holocaust concentration camps or some shit, you certainly have a reason to be pissed off. People have a, like, I'm not saying anyone should ever do anything violent. I'm a person who advocates for people to only do things that are violent if it's in self defense or defense of another. But the main point is this: I don't find hell justifiable. But I would say if I had to pick a person I feel most people would agree would deserve hell, 99% of people would say Hitler. Though it is interesting, a lot of the things he wrote were inspired by books that were written 500 years before he was born. Books that were by people that were, again, praised at the time of their life. So, common consensus on things could change a lot from demographic to region to even time period. In fact, there would probably be many political leaders throughout all of history, from even the dawn of mankind, that would probably hail Hitler as a hero. And that in itself is kind of fucking terrifying. I would even say there's many religious leaders in every religion, even what wouldn't be considered religion, atheism. There would be people of every group imaginable that would actually, espouse these beliefs of that, what Hitler stood for. That being said, that's terrifying. But I suppose aside from the questions about how propaganda and rich people that can control all of media can influence everybody, after all, Hitler's been dead for a very long time. If you had the option to resurrect him just to kill him again, would you do it? Then again, most people say he's probably already burning in hell, and that it's not something we have a choice over. And again, that's also a very fair enough assessment to say that, there's no reason why a human would ever have that kind of choice or authority. But the question is this: if you had that choice, would you do it? And for how long? Especially if, like, after you push Hitler into the fire, if you were required to stand there for 10 minutes listening to him scream before you left. Would you eventually decide that you just don't want anything to do with it and you just leave him alone? Or would you pull that lever? A lever that would just make him not exist? What would you do? I don't know. Again, the main idea of this is, like, whether it's stories like Dante's Inferno or the Hellraiser movies or, well, any rendition of hell, a place of suffering, or you look at people that are being controlled or abused or emotionally broken. It's not a place that would hold demons. It's a place that would create demons. A place that even if you put a good person there, it would wind up corrupting their spirit. They would basically, you just give the person PTSD and trauma over and over until you'd completely break them. It's just, what purpose does it serve other than suffering and vengeance and cruelty and fear? Now, yeah, so that question is, what does everybody think? I don't know. Again, this is a long ass video because I can't do anything as a short video apparently. That's why people write scripts and just make a 30-second blurb. But my main point is this. Like, look at the stuff in the Hellraiser movie. Could you imagine somebody going through that for eternity? Hell, even just a million years. At that point, even the longest lived humans in history, that's a blip in that span of time. Then again, some people say hell could be that the eternal burning is that the concept of hell is forever, but that the person suffering in it's only temporary or is staying, or however, there's many ways people interpret it. But I'm just saying that a large number of people, the vast majority of people that do believe in a hell, believe in it in basically like Dante's Inferno type terms. And I'm just saying, I mean, imagine just the average person going through that for like, it's like, well, it's like you went and ate at Wendy's. It's like, oh, you should have ate at McDonald's. And yeah, I know that sounds dumb, but there's a lot of very, very specific rules in most religions that are about very arbitrary little things, like about, okay, you shouldn't eat this, or you need to pray this way, or do that. And it's just like you have just a large amount of rules that's overly strict. The idea of people being punished so severely over an arbitrary thing. At that point, it's like, why don't we have military helicopters with missiles and rockets and machine guns and Gatling guns? Like, just have a military Apache helicopter enforcing the speed limit on the freeway. I mean, it's excessive. But the main question on this is just, if you had to be the person every single 24 hours to push Hitler into the fires of hell, would you do it? Would you just decide to just pretend he doesn't exist? Or would you pull the lever just making him not exist? I don't know. Main point is that, yeah, I just made a long video that no one's going to listen to. Like, oh, what, a half an hour of a guy apparently rambling about Hitler. I don't know. I'm just saying I couldn't think of a better example for somebody that majority of the human race hates. And justly so. I'm just saying, if you were the one who had to actually push him into the fire every single 24 hours, would you do it? If you had an ability to pull a lever that just made him just cease to exist anymore, would you do it? Or you could just ignore him and leave him in that room for the rest of eternity. Or heck, what if you had the ability to flip the lever around? Basically, you're not pulling the lever. You just turn the lever around and tell him, hey, you pull this lever, you die. And it stops. Or you can just stay in there as long as you want. I don't know. Maybe I'll make a community post trying to shorten it up. Bye.